That Movie Nut here with a review for The Da Vinci Code, the 2006 mystery thriller starring Tom Hanks, Audrey Tautou, Ian McKellen, Alfred Molina, and Paul Bettany. Based on the early 2000s bestseller of the same name, the story follows Robert Langdon, a symbologist who, while lecturing in Paris, is brought in by the police to help investigate a strange riddle left at the murder scene of a curator. There he meets the curator's granddaughter Sophie, and together they embark on a quest to find the Holy Grail. First using clues left by artworks of Da Vinci and then branching out into other locations such as London. However, at the same time, a mysterious figure called the Teacher has enlisted the help of Opus Dei in an effort to stop them and claim the Grail for himself, and as such has brought in the fanatical monk and assassin Silas onto their trail in an effort to stop them. The acting all around is a mixed bag. Tom Hanks and Audrey Tautou play the lead characters, and they do okay in their roles and have about average chemistry, though there's really nothing about either one that really stands out, and they don't really seem to be giving it their all. Audrey in particular seems to struggle with some of the emotional cues. However, it's the supporting cast that really bring things back into motion. Particular notes go to Ian McKellen as the eccentric Grail expert, Sir Teabing, and Paul Bettany as the monk Silas, as well as a few other names like Reno as the inspector, and Alfred Molina as the bishop who looks after Silas. Anytime these actors were on screen, they seemed to be much more invested in the material than the two leads, especially McKellen, who was clearly having fun with the role of the old British eccentric and does get some of the better lines in the movie, and Silas, who is a very enigmatic character, but one that isn't entirely demonized. There are a couple of points where you sympathize and understand what he's doing and why he's doing it, and certainly his performance does exude quite a fair bit of menace, and you get the feeling that this is someone who is determined to do work for God no matter how dirty it may be. Of course, a big budget production like this has to have solid production values, and the Da Vinci Code is no exception. The cinematography here is pretty good. For some strange reason, Ron Howard was nominated for a Razzie for this movie, and I don't see how. Here the direction is pretty good. There's plenty of camera movement. None of it feels televisual. He uses nice wide angles to show off the locations and give us a sense of scale and scope. And it does give a sense of awe and impressiveness to a lot of the old historical buildings like the churches and cathedrals throughout the movie, though occasionally the lighting was a bit questionable, and there were one or two times, especially towards the beginning of the movie, where it was hard to see what exactly was going on because there wasn't enough light. As for the score, which was provided by veteran Hans Zimmer, it is also a solid piece of work and is fittingly ethereal and has a hymn choir-like quality to it, which perfectly fits the film's religious themes, and in many ways draws a couple of parallels to his score from Hannibal from a few years earlier, since it too was lush and melodic, though it doesn't have as many memorable tracks, though at the very least the film's music complements the mood, and there is in fact a good piece played towards the end of the movie, which is actually quite fluid and beautiful. It utilizes choir singing, give a prestigious quality. And now we move to the big thing, which is the script. But before I get into that, I just want to sidetrack quickly. I brought up Hannibal not a few seconds ago when discussing the film school. And in fact, Da Vinci Code and Hannibal share quite a few parallels, especially when it comes to talking about the merits of the movie. Both have a lot of talent in the cast and crew, both were directed by Oscar-winning directors, both have a lot of style, both have a score composed by Hans Zimmer which is lush and beautiful, and both had massive amounts of hype around them, and similarly were critically backlashed when released. Now, for all intents and purposes, I think Hannibal is a better movie, but this is something I want to bring up because, in all fairness, despite all the harsh things that you've probably heard about the Da Vinci Code, I actually like the film. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's some underrated masterpiece and the critics got it completely wrong. No, no, no. The film does have its share of problems. But I feel that the movie was more the victim of hype and people expecting this mind-blowing, groundbreaking film, and instead what they got was an enjoyable, average popcorn thriller. Certainly a bit smarter than your typical popcorn movie, but a popcorn movie nonetheless. And as such, it never really got a chance to stand on its own merits, and be looked at without the glasses of hype. And to be fair, the film is certainly very enjoyable. Its premise is very intriguing in the way that they bring in the Holy Grail myth and they tie it to the types of relationships that Jesus had, which actually is rather intriguing, and sort of bringing a more human aspect to Christ. The wide variety of locations they visit certainly gives the story at least variety to some degree, meaning that it doesn't feel stale, as in it's just set in one city like a lot of other thrillers tend to be. And there were a number of times where, thanks to the direction, I was legitimately on the edge of my seat, and there were a number of really thrilling, entertaining sequences, not to mention any time Bettany and McKellen were on screen. The movie picked up a lot because they were much more dedicated and enthused in their roles than the two leads. And to be fair, the characters were not half bad. I mean, they weren't super deep and I wasn't super invested in them, but at the very least, I was at least a little bit concerned about what was going to happen to them, something that you don't see very often in a lot of the bigger summer movies. And also, I felt the movie moved at a steady enough pace. Some people complain that they tried to cram too much from the book in here, and Akiva Goldsman openly admits they tried to adapt the book pretty much word for word here, and some feel that that's a bit too much. Me, it never really bothered me, though there were a couple of times where it did show. And that really brings me to the problems of the movie, and the film does have quite a few, though they didn't bother me as much as I know it bothered some of the other critics out there. Most of the problems are in the first 20 minutes. The first 20 minutes were pretty awkward, badly written, and not very well staged, and I was just thinking, oh boy, now I'm in trouble. And it felt like they, ironically for a film that's accused of being slow and putting too much in, it felt like they were trying to get through too much in the first 20 minutes far too quickly. But then, once they got out of the museum and began the investigation properly, the film picked up quite quickly. The Leonardo da Vinci stuff, the paintings and such, which, you see slapped all over the marketing and the posters, really don't play that big of a role. In fact, Da Vinci doesn't play that big of a role in the story at all. I mean, he's brought up as one of the Masters of the Priory of Sion, the organization that is protecting the secret of the Holy Grail, but his paintings really only factor in at the very beginning for the first major clue. After that, it's mainly going around famous landmarks and churches to find the remaining clues. And even past that 20 minutes, there were a few lines of dialogue where I was like, ugh, don't tell me you honestly wrote that. Just some really arbitrary, poorly written lines that didn't really add to the film at all and just felt a bit out of place. Also, they try to give Robert Langdon a backstory relating to some childhood trauma, and frankly, I'd be lying if I said that this really didn't contribute in any way, shape, or form to the plot, and it was something that may have been in the books that Goldsman wanted to bring to the screen and frankly should have just been left out because it really doesn't factor in and it's not particularly compelling at all. And frankly, the movie is rather predictable. Basically, if you know your basic character archetypes and you're familiar with what kind of roles these actors play, again, I'm not going to give away any spoilers here, but you'll pretty much work out who is the bad guy a good while before the film gets to it. And for some, this may be a deal breaker, but on the whole, the film did what a good mystery thriller should do. It kept me on the edge of my seat for the most part. Is it perfect? No, absolutely not. And for some, the first 20 minutes may be enough to completely deal break, but for me, I persevered, and what I found was a surprisingly entertaining and competently made film. It had very stylish direction, it had solid production values, and the supporting cast more than made up for the average work of the two leads, which is surprising considering that Tom Hanks has proven himself many times to be a very capable actor. And so, in conclusion, I must give the Da Vinci Code a bronze star, but a high one, practically bordering on silver. However, what stops it getting that grade is that all the little problems start adding up and gradually the cracks start to show, and ultimately it would be unfair to give it such a high grade. But still, it's not as bad as you've probably heard it is. It has problems, yes, but on the whole I found it to be rather enjoyable. It had a great premise, solid production, and it had moments where it really did shine and had a lot of great things going for it. And given how cheaply the movie can be found these days, it won't break your bank if you decide to check it out.